Alrighty. Well, good evening, good morning, good night, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for being here. So my name is Sophie Arp, and I will be the moderator for the next hour as we discuss our rainforest ecotourism and its relationship with rainforest conservation. We have an incredible cast of panelists here with a whole array of background of expertise. So I'm very excited to hear all that they have to say and to help guide this conversation. So before I let them all introduce themselves, I just wanted to give a bit of a background about me before we begin. So I'm currently calling in from St. Louis in Missouri in the US, and I run here an organization called Friends of the Rainforest. So our mission is to inspire kids and adults to take action to protect and preserve the rainforest. And we do this in a number of different ways. We provide free environmental education to schools and community groups in the area. So teachers will invite us into their classrooms and we'll go teach about the rainforest and really just try to build that bridge between the Midwest here in the US and the rainforest abroad. And we also have a conservation grant program. We work mostly with the Monteverde Conservation League down in the Children's Eternal Rainforest in Costa Rica. And the last bit of our programming is that we organize eco-tours to go down and visit the Children's Eternal Rainforest in Costa Rica. So, most of my experience comes from this more organizational side of everything. So I'm super excited to hear everything that our wonderful panelists have to say. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. I don't know if anyone wants to start with introducing themselves. If not, I can just choose somebody. John, let's go with you because we've got an order on our list here.
Sure. First of all, it's an honor to be part of this event. The Rainforest Partnership is an amazing group, and they've put together an unbelievable conference. World Rainforest Day is so significant, and it's brought a lot of people together. So it's really an honor to be a part of it, and also to be an honor. It's an honor to be with my co-panelists. Your work is extremely important, and I can tell you that the other two folks here are experts in various rainforests around the world. So nobody better. So it's a great. I agree with you. It's a great panel, and I'll try to keep up with the expertise that we have here. I'm John Bruno. I'm the executive director of the International Ecotourism Society, and we work very hard around the world to grow sustainable natural tourism that benefits the communities in which it takes place, that conserves and strengthens ecosystems. And a lot of people are implementing ecotourism right now. So ecotourism is receiving a lot of attention. And that's why I think it's very important to understand what it is and understand how to properly grow it and understand how to properly implement it in communities. So I think this is an incredibly important panel because the rainforests are some of the most vulnerable ecosystems that we have and have some of the most important culturally and historically communities that we have that are sometimes potentially underrepresented in global conversations. So I think it's very important, not only the panelists that we have here today, but the fact that we're addressing ecotourism in the rainforest is incredibly important.
Wonderful. Moving right along to Jerry.
Hi, yes, good evening. I'm Jerry A-Kum. I'm from the country Suriname, which is in South America, the northern south of South America. And I started working in ecotourism in 1993. That's pretty long ago. And I can recall talking about ecotourism in my country. People were skeptical about it. People didn't believe in ecotourism. So it has been a very long journey working at government level, working with communities to ensure that whatever tourism activities are implemented, that indeed local communities benefit from it. And it's a very challenging task. And I'm honored, just like what John alluded to be part of this event and also to share my experiences with the world and learn from others as well. So I'm really looking forward to this incredible event. Thank you for the opportunity.
Alrighty, and last but not least.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Ang. I'm from Sarawak, Borneo, Sarawak, Malaysia, Borneo. So basically, I grew up nearby the rainforest and then, play around with rainforest. So currently, I'm working with the Society of Wilderness Sarawak. It's an NGO. What we are doing basically is we believe in bottom-up model where we educate the general public, the community, in terms of the what we have here in rainforest. We bring them for the observation and so on, so that they can appreciate our environment more. Yeah, so we do partner with SOWS Nature School, where we organize ecotourism trip, which is we focus on educational activity in the primary rainforest. So, like we organize activity like nature sightseeing, local heritage, local cultural heritage, experiential kind of thing, yeah, observation and so on. So with the objective to preserve the land through the ecotourism. Yeah, me myself, I'm not any rainforest expert. I would say that the title is too big for me. I think, yeah. What the best teacher that we have is the rainforest itself. It taught us a lot of things. Yeah, that's all for me. Thank you. Looking forward to the session.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have all of you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is just how do we see ecotourism in the world? What are its core principles? How would we define it? And how can we differentiate it between other forms of tourism? Let's go ahead and just go in the same order for this round.
I think the most important thing about ecotourism, you've heard it here in the introductions. It can be easily gleaned. The difference between, let's say, natural tourism, nature tourism, and ecotourism is that ecotourism is focused on a positive outcome. And that means for the ecosystems, for conservation, but also for the communities. It's very important that the communities are a part of that. So that it means focusing on having revenue go into the communities and stay in the communities. Focus on uplifting the communities and celebrating their histories and traditions. Focus on the ecosystems that are managed in a traditional way, not coming in and telling people kind of how to do things really, because but respecting the knowledge that's there in the communities already. So we're very much, it's funny, I heard, last panel, somebody was talking about the difference, and there is definitely a difference between top-down and bottom-up conservation. And ecotourism is definitely bottom-up. We seek to learn from the communities, learn from what's already there, and as Ang mentioned, learn from the rainforest rather than teach the rainforest. We're here for a few short years, so the goal is to make our contribution to the eternal rainforests something positive, not something destructive.
All right, and Jerry, yeah.
Yes, in my opinion, it is pivotal that if you're going to develop whatever ecotourism product, that you get the local communities on board. And getting them on board, it's not an easy task. Within communities, you have different groups. And my experience has been so far, getting women on board from indigenous communities is critical, because they will ensure that once they understand the process, they will get others on board and make it a success. So getting local communities is instrumental, ensuring that local authorities, that they understand the concept. And as John mentioned, whatever the outcome is, local communities, they want to experience something tangible. And if you look at several countries in the world, there are several threats. Logging, for instance. So a logging company can approach a community easily and say, I'm going to offer you $1,000 on a weekly basis, which is, that's a lot of money for communities. So you have to be on the ground. You have to have your people working closely with them to ensure that people understand the concept of ecotourism. People have to know that if you're going into ecotourism, you might not see the results immediately, so it will take some time. So it's an ongoing process. Getting people on board, giving them the confidence that this is about your culture, this is about nature, it's about conservation, and we all have a role to play. And I also believe that throughout the process, there has to be constant monitoring, whereby local communities are included and share the results of the monitoring. Why is that important? Because you have to make changes where necessary. And again, as I said earlier, you have several threats. And to counter those threats, you have to be on the ground. You have to know what's going and use your skills, people's skills, to get people on board, and most importantly, to keep them on board. And that is not an easy task. I'm talking from my own experience here, but it's very rewarding if things go quite well. Rewarding for all of us involved, rewarding for the community, rewarding for conflict agent. That's it so far for me.
Wow, a very nice one. Yeah, I will very much agree with what John and Jerry said. Yeah, so I just want to add one more point on the ecotourism and the core principle of it. I believe that there is one point that we have to look into, which is the sustainability. So on the topic of the sustainability, I think there's three main aspects that we need to look into: the economical part, the environmental part, and the society or the local community part. And often the time, projects or the ecotourism, they might site into certain area. Probably they site into business, they want to earn more, yeah, or they might site into conservation, they want to protect the land. But I personally would say we need to balance the effort on these three things, to ensure that the economical input is sufficient to protect the environment, so that support the economic input for the local community to take care of the environment. By balancing these three aspects, I think the sustainable model will work in a way that conserve the land and the economy, is sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Maybe can I add? Yes. Can I add something? What's also critical? Research, data, collecting data. Because if let me give a very simple example. The tourism satellite account is important for tourism development, whereby you can determine what a country is really earning through tourism. And if you're dealing with both private and public sector, having relevant data can give politicians especially the guarantee that, especially on a long-term base, you can earn much more than just 5 years through logging or whatever commercial activity. So ecotourism, we're talking about long-term benefits, but our group, we understand it, but you have to have data, relevant data, to prove your point, to give evidence to politicians and private sector that this is the way forward. So I wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, and I think that actually segues us pretty nicely into this next question that I want to touch on, which is just what are the impact metrics for ecotourism? How do we define success in ecotourism? And so I know with the economic aspect, obviously there's numbers that we can look at. So I'm interested in hearing what you think about that, but also just more in like the respect for local communities. How are you measuring, making sure that you are having the most positive impact and outcome there? And Jerry, if you want to go ahead and start, we'll just bounce back to you.
Yes, that's not an easy task. It depends on the country as well. In my case, having dealt with Amerindian communities and Maroon communities, and you will quickly find out that they probably don't have the necessary skills. But I think Ang mentioned that earlier. Do not underestimate people. That has always been my approach. People probably don't have the academic background or educational background, but if you engage with them, you will understand that they have been respecting the rainforest for ages, for centuries, and they know how to treat the rainforest.
That's right.
So I think that combination, talking with them, elderly people, they will tell you, for instance, this is what we used to have. This is the current situation. Something has changed throughout the years. And they will also explain how come changes have occurred. So I think it's important to keenly listen to the community, what they have to say, to listen to their input. And with their input, again, depending on the community, because Amerindians are somehow different from Maroon communities, but the input coming out of the community is something that can be utilized to determine what has been going right or wrong, especially with regards to ecotourism. Another example, as we all know, if you're developing ecotourism, local employment is very important. So you're creating jobs for the community, but I believe it has to be closely monitored. People, all of a sudden, they have a job, they're involved in tourism. What are the impacts? What have been the impacts? And again, through engagement with the community, you can find out whether it has been positively experienced or not, or whether the community is ready for something different or something new. So there has to be an interexchange between those that are into ecotourism and the communities. The point I'm trying to make here is listen to the community all the time and monitoring all the time. That's it.
All right, Eng, could we bounce back to you?
Okay, sure. Looking into the impact matrices that, to measure the success, there are a few things I would say. First thing, I think the economy input that they put in, and after the input, the resources is collected at the community level or the local area. Yeah. So I think that economy has to be fairly distributed to the stakeholders, to the community, to the service provider, to the probably taxation for the government. So having that distribution, then I think everyone can strive and work together to protect the rainforest for the conservation effort. And then secondly, through the input of the economy, then the livelihood of the local community can be supported. The well-being can be taken care of. The community now is not like what we have in the previous kind of living pattern. They have the needs like us in urban. They need to buy things. They need to buy their daily needs. Though the way they live is totally different. They are very much dependent. They have cell phones. They have computers and so digital technology kind of things. So they need money to survive. So by having this economy, we can support them. And then also we need governance, like what Jerry said. Governance is a thing that a basic rules or regulation that help set the direction of how the place is being used, is being capitalized, to generate sustainable income. Right. The place, the local cultural heritage, which is closely related to the nature environment that the local community live in. And last but not least, I think and ecotourism is not just touch and go kind of tourism. It must have educational kind of element in the whole system, whole ecosystem. The educational, they are in twofold. One is for the external part, where the tourists come in and learn from the rainforest, learn about the local culture. And the second part of it would be the knowledge body that built from the local community. The people learn the skill from the expert, from the external. They upgrade themselves. I mean, the local community upgrade themselves, and they preserve the environment better. They generate better products. I would say ecotourism product for the offering. So educational thing is something that is a catalyst for the sustainability. I think that's all from me. Perhaps I pass the baton to John.
I'm happy to add mine. First of all, those are excellent. Right up they absolutely point out the problem. I think first of all, what we look for as KPIs for successful ecotourism is we look for economic distribution, as Ang said. Ecotourism is absolutely not about investors coming in, creating opportunities for tourists to come in and then removing the money from the community. That isn't ecotourism. So what we look for, and also a lot of research has been done around the fact that when a dollar comes into the community and stays in the community, it generates more wealth, more happiness for that community. Right. So what we want is ecotourism has been shown to be the most efficient way to have a tourism revenue come into a community and stay in the community, because it's small businesses, it's local services, it's local tour guides. That's number one. And Jerry mentioned, I think the most important part of all is listening. It absolutely isn't ecotourism when you come in and tell a community how things are going to be. Without listening, you're absolutely not. I can tell you right now, all over the world, all three of us are having to tell certain people, listen, you have to listen to the community, because sometimes people forget that. So the community's level of happiness with the tourism is incredibly important. The way the revenue is filtering into the community is incredibly important. What the community is doing with that revenue is incredibly important. And what you'll see, because I have around the world, is that when a community has the gentle, organic rise in cash flow that a properly introduced ecotourism implementation has. In other words, there's not all of a sudden a lot of money. There's not, it rises organically so that people can generate their own systems of distribution. Then you see things like dentist offices, doctors' offices, better schools, because the community is spending that money. And it's amazing how if it goes into the pocket of an investor overseas, it doesn't do anything in the community, or one extremely wealthy person, it doesn't do anything in the community. But when it stays in the community, it gets used for bedrock items that continue to build that community. And therefore, ecotourism is creating ancillary benefits that, as both Jerry and Ang said, resonate down the ages. So 30 years from now, this ecotourism will have a positive effect because a child will benefit from the nutrition and most of all, not just the external things, but the child will benefit from seeing his or her community as a place that people respect. And that's very, very important.
Sophie,
Mhm.
if I may.
Absolutely.
Yes. What I think is also essential from a community standpoint, it can also occur that through ecotourism within the community, maybe 2 or 3 families are only benefiting. So the point I'm trying to make here is you really have to communicate with a community constantly and to avoid situations whereby tensions occur between families in the community. Right? So, and I spoke earlier about women. They are very strong in communities and they work across everything. So that's a very strong partner that one can have in the development of ecotourism in indigenous communities and rural communities. But you have to constantly monitor what is happening. And if there are mistakes, if you made mistakes, make the changes. Because if you get the community against you, you don't want that to happen to you.
No. No.
All right, yes.
All right. Well, y'all have done a wonderful job of touching on a lot of the things that I want to bring up now, but perhaps we could go a little bit deeper into just, we've talked a lot about the indigenous communities that live in these areas. So what are those opportunities? What are the benefits that they're seeing? If we could dig a little bit deeper and just give a couple more examples of that. And we can go back to you, John.
I think the key thing to consider is that it comes from a point that both Ang and Jerry have mentioned earlier, and that's that tourism, when properly handled, properly monitored, and when it's properly a part of the community, is an infinite resource. You've seen some governments around the world, and I'm not going to name them, there's no need to, who have in 30 years mined out a resource that they had. And for 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, everybody's rich. And then the economy collapses and there's misery everywhere. And they've destroyed their environment for a few years to make a few people very rich, and then everyone else is miserable. Well, if the thing about tourism that's great is that if you're not destroying your environment, then you have this eternal resource. People come back and they want to show their children. And so, 100 years from now, if we take care of our rainforests, they're going to be there and people are still going to want to see them. And one of the most important things about ecotourism is that it allows engagement from the traveler, from the visitor. So they see these things and they want to protect them. When you read about a thing on, 1,000 miles of forest got burned up today. Oh, that's terrible. But, it doesn't impact you. But when you've seen it and you've seen that now something that you love, that you personally have a connection with, that people's first names in those communities is suddenly gone, you better believe you're more invested in solving that problem. So what we strive to do with ecotourism for the traveler, as Ang mentioned, is educate them so that they can understand when they go into these communities and make that connection. And what that creates is two things. One, as I said before, an understanding in some of these communities, because I hope Jerry will talk more about this, but sometimes there's a belief that these communities are somehow inferior to urban communities or wealthy countries. That has to go away. Ecotourism that has nothing to do with what we represent. Number two is that when there is revenue connected to the conservation of something, and I'll use China as an example. When they're protecting, let's say, the red-crowned crane, right? If there is revenue connected to that, then the local people become, whether they're indigenous or not, whether they're a steward community, whether they're a local community, they become invested in the protection of those ecosystems and those vulnerable animals that are being threatened, and they want to keep those because they're generating revenue for them. So there's economic interest, there's historic interest, there's cultural interest. All of that is currently going on, and all of it creates a strong interest in sustaining history, in sustaining culture, and above all, in sustaining and conserving ecosystems.
Right.
All right, how about we move on to Jerry again?
Yes. I want to start with a simple example. In 1993, when I started in a remote village in southern Suriname, an Amerindian village, you couldn't see traditional artifacts. But because of tourism, because of ecotourism, because of the interest of tourists, they wanted to purchase traditional artifacts. That product, it enhanced people. All of a sudden, they knew that whatever we have, we can present it to the world. We can present it to tourists. And as John alluded to, these circumstances whereby people portray a situation that local communities are inferior, that's not good. So through tourism, ecotourism, that's what I like about it. You can create opportunities that will benefit both the local community and visitors. And I use the word visitor for a reason. If you have a bakery that was set up with funds from an ecotourism project, all of a sudden, bakery products are available to the community, but also tourists have access to the products, and also visitors, people from within, people from the country itself. And remote communities, unfortunately, they depend on central government for education or what have you, or medical purposes. But if you have a situation whereby ecotourism will benefit the community, you can take care of your own circumstances, have your own schools, have your own medical facilities. So it will sustain, as John mentioned, the community. And because of that, because of these circumstances, people will go at length to protect what they have. People will appreciate it a lot more and respect it a lot more. And if you're talking about conservation, the same concept. You will be approached, as I mentioned earlier, all of a sudden by companies coming from all over the world. Hey, I'm interested in logging. What can we do? And if you're living in poverty, you don't have access to education, the choice is quickly made. unless you have a good alternative, which is ecotourism, that will benefit the community and they will see something tangible. No lip surface, it has to be tangible. People have to see the benefits. They have to see that the children can go to school, for instance. And in Guyana, for instance, what they do, they created a fund in a community, an Amerindian community. And if children have to go to university in Georgetown, the capital, they use funds, the money from that fund to provide for university education. And of course, most of them go back to the community. And that's why this village in Guyana is doing an extremely good job with regards to ecotourism development and implementation. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. On this opportunity that unlocked for the local rainforest community, I think I believe that education and the exposure that brought to the local communities is one of the key opportunities that locals harnessing. And why I say so, you see, education extends to the different group of people of the local community, from the children, from the elderly, from the government, from the management body. Everyone learn. When the demands come in, then, for example, the policymaker have to enhance the policy to ensure the place is well taken care of. The local community will work together, to think of the idea how to generate good income to sustain the environment. Right. Yeah. And then I believe this bottom up or top down model, is a sustainable one, where you, through the empowerment to the local champion, to the local community, to take care of the environment themselves, to manage environment. This requires skill. So when this external force came in, so they got a skill, they got the experience, piled up experience to better manage the environment. And I will say that the nature, it used to self-sustain, but these days, if human don't intervene and manage the resources that we have, someone will take away that resources, the logging company, agriculture, and so on. So someone have to manage and govern the place. And due to the population growth of the local community, they need inject of new economical resources. And comparing the pre-COVID and post-COVID kind of trend, pre-COVID, I will say I'll explain more on the cases of Sarawak, Borneo, where the input is mostly coming from overseas. People come here to visit the rainforest here, but due to the constraint or limitation of the COVID, the demands actually now from the local community, from the urban area of the state, the location itself. So it's a shift, I would say. So where I'm living at the urban area, oftentimes we are the one who stays so close to the rainforest, but oftentimes we take it for granted. Yeah. So I think it's a good shift. How we can through education, through awareness, we can build a stronger local community to protect our homeland, to take care of it. Yeah, I think that's all from me.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love the defining success by however the Indigenous communities define it, and really following along with their guidance. I'm going a little rogue. I'm throwing in a question that was not necessarily on our agenda, but something that I feel like we've been focusing a lot on, working with local communities. And I guess the implication has kind of been remote local or Indigenous communities that perhaps don't have any tourism industry in their communities before. So if any of you can speak on your experiences, the challenges if a tourism industry already exists, but it's not ecotourism, like what are the challenges there in trying to establish a sustainable, ethical ecotourism in an area that's perhaps already dominated by traditional tourism? I'll leave the floor open to whoever wants to answer first.
Well, I'll start. Let's consider the idea that the very first thing is that the community has to want tourism. you don't put tourism in a community and call it ecotourism where they don't ask for it. So there are many different, and this is the sad thing, and I'm going to defer to my colleagues specifically on this, but what I notice, is that in many cases, indigenous communities are seen as monolithic. They have one set of priorities. That's absolutely not true. There's every different kind of priority between various communities. Some want certain things, some want other things. So it goes back to what Jerry said. There has to be, listening. There has to be understanding. And again, I'll defer to my colleagues on that specific point. But I think if we look at models of where there might be existing exploitive or extractive tourism in place, that's unusual. But if it, when it does happen, it either is a case we talked about before, where someone has gone and said, well, I'll give a certain person this much money and they can implement this thing. Or have this one concession and nobody else gets it. So it's kind of an enrichment prospect. It really is about making connections. And I want to make it very clear that not all the communities in the rainforest are indigenous communities either. There are steward communities who have every right to call on their knowledge as well. And these steward communities sometimes want tourism. And when they want sustainable tourism, our challenge is simply to say exactly, the data that we mentioned before, and show people there is you can earn a certain amount over a long period of time. You show the stability. Sometimes people like to see from other communities in their area. Sometimes they're interested in what communities do around the world. Again, to assume that an indigenous community isn't somehow interested in global affairs is absolutely incorrect. So, you want to be able to basically have the data and the education, but also I think a lot of people in many communities are shocked that we place very strong emphasis on the education of the visitor and the traveler, right? That we need them to behave a certain way. There's always an assumption that, well, they're paying money, they get to do whatever they want. Absolutely not how we view it. We view the traveler as having an obligation. And so to get that in people's minds as well is something very interesting to behold. And what happens is, once you come in and you help with capacity building, because that's always necessary. If you just open something up, it's going to fail and it'll create a bad taste in people's mouth. But if you go in and you help people build the capacity to have the types of tourism that they want, then you'll see people will learn from that, and they'll do things that you didn't think of. They'll start doing things on the side. And as Jerry said, if you're kind of gently monitoring and there to help when people ask, and here's some knowledge, here's what other people have tried, here's what's been successful around the world, you'll see they'll grow their tourism industry right up to the point that they want it. And that's how I think the best implementation is. And I think that has a lot to do with why ecotourism is growing so quickly, and why everyone, over 100 countries are implementing it now. So is that aspect of it, is that it's sort of driven by the people.
Right.
All right. Does anyone else want to jump in with that question? John, I think you did one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It also depends on what a country would like to achieve. In some countries, you have tourism zoning, and they have areas specifically for mass tourism, and then other areas for ecotourism. So it depends on that as well. I believe, and John spoke about it, I strongly believe in research, in data. If it is clear to communities that, for instance, an ecotourist on average is spending a lot more money in a community, they respect local communities and local traditions a lot more. The benefits are a lot more as opposed to mass tourism. I think it's a process that once communities are aware of it, they will come to the conclusion, or might come to the conclusion, that's what we would like to have on long term. So it's not something that you can determine. You have to work closely with the communities. And again, you have to share data, relevant information with them, why ecotourism is so benefit to local communities, and give them practical examples. What's happening in the neighboring village, for instance, or an area not far away. Yes, it looks nice. You have so many visitors, but maybe the economic leakage is extremely high. That particular area is not really benefiting. So you can give that information to them and have sessions, what we call a kurutu, which is a gathering of local community, and teach them that, hey, on the long run, ecotourism will be far more beneficial to your community. And I enjoyed what John just mentioned, the visitor education. That's critical. That's very important. That's my take on it.
Yeah. On the challenges itself, I would say there's a few that I would like to point out. I think the first thing is the product. Yeah, I see this ecotourism as a product offering, yeah, for the international market and for the local market. So when you come up with a product, there is this unique selling point, or the things that you want to sell for your audience. So I think to come up with that product, we have to be careful to really understand what we have here in your rainforest. Okay. Or secondly, I think the challenges will be the conflict. There's a lot of conflict you have to manage especially for the ecotourism industry. Conflict with the local community, the ownership, yeah, of the land, the conflict with, the economy. You have to, buy the chunk. For example, you're competing with the logging company, for the agriculture company. Those are big corporate that come in with a lot of resources.
That's right.
So conflicts, I think, is one of the things that we have to manage. And another thing would be the availability of the ability and credibility of the management. Where do the local community or the management team that having this ability? So those are some of the challenges I would say. Yeah, kind of like, we need to find a solution to it. The demand from the audience or the visitors that come in. Yeah, I would say the demand, when we have that demand, then the supply will shape or mold accordingly. So how do we make that demand in order to taking care of the environment? Yeah, whatever we bring in, we have to. I think as a global citizen, when I visit to an ecotourism site, I will put myself as small as possible. We are here to learn from the rainforest. I hope I try not to bring in any expectation from my culture, from my heritage, from my background. So I come here to learn and observe. Yeah, I think that's the principle or perception that everyone have to bring in when they come. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Also, I just want to do a quick shout out, compliments to our background music. It's really sweet. Whoever's singing in the background, I don't know if you're hearing it. So our next question is, just how does rainforest ecotourism differentiate from other forms of ecotourism? So what are the unique perks that we're seeing, and what are some of the unique challenges? People will just go in the same order. John?
I'd actually like to defer to my colleagues because they have more specific knowledge of their specific rainforest, and then I can wrap up sort of a global perspective.
Cool. That sounds great. Eng, would you like to start us off again?
Sorry, I missed that just now.
The question?
You mean the challenges?
So how does rainforest-specific ecotourism kind of differentiate from just ecotourism more broadly?
Rainforest tourism, I would say, because what we see in the rainforest, right? You see very diverse kind of things here compared to the nature tourism. Yeah, so diverse means that the biodiversity and then the linking between the natural environment and the cultural heritage. So when you walk into the rainforest ecotourism, then you can't miss the cultural part, the local community part. Like for example, in Sarawak case, we have 40 plus ethnic groups. I personally believe that is like connected to the environment, the diversity of the environment that we live in. So yeah, I think that's one of the major difference that we have as compared to other tourism products.
Yeah, Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Maroon communities, indigenous communities have been utilizing the rainforest for decades, for ages, for centuries. And there are several products that, for some reason, they don't create them or don't make them anymore because there is no demand and there are influences coming from other areas. So I think through ecotourism, it's an opportunity for the community to go back to the roots, to go back to the traditions. And because of the new demand, which is created through tourism and visitors, that has been enhanced. Let me give you an example. You can make a boat in the traditional way, dugout canoe, or you can buy one in town. It's better to use a dugout canoe because that has been a tradition for ages. But if you're an ecotourist, you can go to a village and you can see, you can experience the traditional way of making a dugout canoe. So if I were in the business and I know that there is a demand, I will stay in the business. I will make a boat, one boat per month. I make an honest living. And because of my production, because of my community involvement, my tourism involvement, I have some income and I can take care of other things. And because of this, I'm keeping a tradition alive. I am keeping traditions alive for future generations. Another example, medicinal plants. They have been used by indigenous and Maroon communities for centuries. But again, because of external influences, some traditions are no longer there. But if I were a tourist, and I've seen that, people going to a community, the remedy against malaria was discovered by Kwasi, and Kwasi was a slave in Suriname. So that's something that is still in use. You can go to the community and taste it and make some drinks with it. There's so many things that you can experience. So because of that external influence, the tourists, the ecotourism, you are creating opportunities again, and you are enhancing traditions that probably have not been there for some reason or for whatever reason. So it is quite interesting to experience that. People are, they're becoming very enthusiastic. Hey, there's a demand. People are appreciating my product, and I'm going to do it again. So in the southern part of Suriname, maybe you had in the beginning, in the 90s, two people doing a particular product or making a particular product. But because of ecotourism, more people got involved. So the impact of tourism on that community has increased. And people are very positive towards it. And because of that, they will safeguard their traditions at all costs. So that's it for me.
From a global perspective, ecotourism in the rainforest is, as my colleagues mentioned, it's about there's a lot of diversity, and that means biodiversity. So and people in general from the large source markets aren't as used to traveling in with the care that they need to display to be in sometimes communities that have very few visitors or less visitors than, let's say, they're used to, but also interacting with incredibly diverse environments. We in some of the source markets, and I don't speak for everyone, but certainly in the United States, have stripped and homogenized our environment so that we only encounter one type of banana, whereas in, certain countries, in the South Pacific, they have 50 different types of bananas. And so, you'll see people who are traveling there absolutely stunned by the biodiversity, by the various birds, by the various plants, by the various colors that they see around them. So I think, but the key is to not have them imagine that this can be changed for their convenience. So it's a question of educating, and I think that's very important, right? When someone's coming into this environment, this fragile, beautiful, dense, biodiverse environment, to educate travelers so that they understand what they're stepping into. And they always really enjoy that. It isn't it? Once you start educating a person, usually they keep on educating themselves. So, it's just getting that start, to teach the traveler how to research, how to learn, how to connect. We've created this environment where people, imagine that you have to stay separate from, the people that you're traveling when you're traveling into their communities. Ecotourism is very much about creating a connection with the communities and also with the ecosystems. So when people genuinely understand what's behind that leaf and what's behind this forest floor, they become really engaged, and they can point out what they saw, what they did, and it affects them. It goes into them. It becomes a part of them. And then for the rest of their lives, they're converts, and they're trying to figure out, how can I help these things? That you see everywhere. I mean, if there are people commenting, or if there are people, when I meet people, always they have these stories. So when they go in the rainforest, it changes their life a little bit for the better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If I can add something, yes, we have to be cautious as well, especially in smaller countries like mine. You will be approached by companies that claim to be into ecotourism.
That's right.
We have to find the right balance, and often we don't have the resources, we don't have financial resources, we don't have the academic resources to make a good judgment. So I believe in what John spoke about earlier. Through networking, we have to help each other, especially the communities, to ensure that they are not approached by people who claim to be into ecotourism, and eventually it's all about their own benefits. So that's very important.
And Jerry, once again, you set me up perfectly, segued into the next question. So, as a tourist, a consumer, a visitor, looking at ecotourism offerings, and, obviously internally, when you're conducting ecotours, it's that buy-in and the local participation that's like the most important. But as a consumer looking for ecotourism to go on, what are some red flags that I can look for to kind of get a good sense of whether this ecotourism company is doing what they say? Do you have any advice for that?
Yes. I believe that whenever we're talking about ecotourism, a visitor, it starts with you. You have a role to play. And, it's always good to look at some reviews of a company or an organization that has been into ecotourism. And don't only look at TripAdvisor, there are other ways of finding out whether a company has done accordingly, acted accordingly. And I know for a fact that through local associations, local tourism bodies, you can find out more. For instance, let me give you an example. I have a group on LinkedIn called the Suriname Ecotourism Circles. And almost every week, I share information with the members about ecotourism, the role that they have to play, the role that they can play, and the changes that they can make. So the awareness has to come also from the visitor. Often people think, oh, it's the company's responsibility, but we have a role to play as well as visitors. And, ecotourism somehow has become a buzzword. People use it easily. But if you're on a tour, simple examples, look at what type of equipment is utilized. That's what I do. That's one. Secondly, I always talk with staff. I get a good rapport through talking with staff, what's really happening on the ground, whether they are well paid, so to speak, or whether they are well rewarded, and how the company has been managing its ecotourism activities, whether the leadership of the community has been involved. Because yes, someone can fool me, but once I'm on the ground, trust me, as we say in the Caribbean, I will talk with people and find out more about the company. And I will share my experiences with others, because I hate it with a passion when local communities are exploited for whatever reason, or ecotourism or so forth, So that's how I do it. And when I was a tour guide, visitor education was critical. Before people leave the country, that's what I always told my company, visitor education starts at the destination, at the resource market. There, you have to explain to the visitor what they're going to expect, experience, how they should behave, and what they should do in order to make this a success. So it starts in, for instance, the Netherlands. And once they meet with me as a tour guide, we will have teach-in sessions where I will go through this information again and explain to them what is important. If you go in an Amerindian community, for instance, there are certain traditions for men, traditions for women, and we adhere to that because we don't want the local community against you. That's something that shouldn't occur to me. So those are some of the things that I think are important to answer your question.
Yeah, Ing, do you have anything to contribute?
I would say governance. Our governance is very important. I think there should be some certification or licensing in place to monitor, to set a good practice guideline for the local community or for the audience that come in. Yeah. So I believe in two, like governance is top to bottom, and then the education is bottom up.
That's right.
So yeah. So in between, there's this consumer, the audience or the visitors, and the local community connect to each other. Yeah. So in this aspect, in this spectrum, I will say the consumer should be aware of the impact that they make when they come in. Being a responsible global citizen, we should treat all the rainforest as our home. Even if I travel to somewhere else, we should treat it as our home. How we would take care of our homeland.
Right.
Yeah. And then the local community at the same time, they upgrade their ability or the credibility to manage a place, to offer the products. Yeah. So that's a bit of my sharing.
Great, thank you. And so being a little mindful of the time, I know Nabil said we could go over a bit. I do want to hand it virtually off to him and see if there are any questions from the audience that we could pose to our panelists now. And if you're tuning in and you got something you want to ask them, feel free to share it in the chat.
Whoa.
All right, so Reina is asking, how do we ensure that the money going into an ecotourism project goes directly to the community and stays in the community?
I can start that one. First of all, sadly, there is no word ensure. We can try, we can work toward, but ensure is not really always. I want to touch on, the one of the things that you've heard throughout this panel is that regulation and interfacing is important, right? And so, we mentioned that government is an important part. I think it's very important to understand that when there are organizations in the world that just go around and deal with the very top level of government, and there are tourism organizations and even sustainable tourism organizations that just deal with the top level of government. They're never really in country. They don't really have a strong presence in countries, but they just deal with sort of a monolithic way of tourism, and they go and they sell it to the very top people in government. Then that standard is adopted and implemented almost incorrectly because it really can't be. So what you want to look for is you want to look for both government and community. Both of those things have to be sort of in sync. You have to have government, you have to have community, you have to have experts. All of these things, so there's capacity building to make sure that there's potential buy-in. So when you're talking about revenue in a community, I think you have to look at the effects of that revenue. And as Jerry said, right, you really have to get to the level of talking to people. You have to see kind of, you have to have a long-term plan. You have to be there. You have to be in the community and say, what's going on? How is this going? And since there are very complex issues such as land rights and the way that money is distributed and the fact that many of these communities are underbanked, there's not really a financial, spreadsheet that you can send to someone. You really have to be genuinely connected and watch how the money flows through these communities. And some cases you won't be able to manage it. But what we like to say in the ecotourism world is one of the things that's created a lot of the benefit that we see now and the desire for sustainability is baby steps. So when you make some progress, that's good. And in general, as Ang mentioned earlier, there are champions for these things in each area. And so empowering those champions to proceed in the right way, to allow the visibility of the funds going through the community, and to encourage travelers to use ancillary experiences around their main tourism objective, such as local tour guides, local food, locally sourced gifts, locally sourced products, all of those things. So you've heard that mentioned here today. And so that's, I think, the way that you can ensure by patronizing small businesses and by teaching travelers who they can interact with and what the products are and what the food is and what the traditions and culture and history are behind these offerings, gives them an incentive to engage in them and have a much more fulfilling experience, I think, is the way you do that.
Absolutely. All right, we got another question from Amalia. She says, what are the challenges Indigenous communities face when assessing and implementing ecotourism solutions?
Perhaps I can share some insight
Please.
on that. I think it's very connected to the previous question. Yeah, the challenges that they face, because when they implement the ecotourism, they need resources, they need to have the ability, they need to have know-how. Yeah, so I think these challenges have to be, someone have to come in and help them, help the local, or contribute something to uplift the current situation. Okay, so I think through the economical part, it's not by nature that it will be distributed fairly. People are greedy, humans are greedy in nature. We want more. But how do we design the economy that could be distributed fairly? That is one of the things that we need to consider. So by designing that, local community, how do they benefited from this economical income? I believe in what John said. Yeah, empowerment to the local community. Yeah, that is a very strong strategy. When they manage their product themselves, they offer their product themselves, they gain the income from that, then they have greater control. And again, we need to have some governance from the international body, the local auditing body, the government, and the policy in place, through taxation and everything. Then you will control or manage a place. And I would say we will need another advisory board with expert, with technical expert, with rainforest expert, with conservation expert, with business strategies expert, that provide the insight of the drive of the development of that ecotourism at the local community level. Yeah. So those challenges are, I would say, it's not just indigenous community. I would say it's the local, larger community sometimes.
Yes. I spoke earlier about a community in Guyana, in South America. The name of the community is Surama. And they manage the entire tourism chain, from transportation to accommodation. So they are fully in control. It's an Amerindian community. What they did, through the benefits of tourism, they created a village fund. And if youngsters are ready to go to university or whatever education outside the community, it is paid for. And then they return. So that's how they manage to control the entire tourism chain. And that tourism, that community, Surama, is doing extremely well. So they see to it that funds, they benefit the community indeed.
All right, perfect. Also, I want to point out that last question was from Mark. My brain just totally skipped over the question from Mark part. It seems we have another question here from Elizabeth. is there a tour where I can purchase carbon credit from the indigenous people to offset my travel, etc.? Anyone have any advice for Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of talk about, offsetting and carbons and things like that. And so, there's national ways to approach it, local ways to approach it. The world still hasn't really settled on the view of offsetting for indigenous communities. So, I don't think that's a question we can answer here today. But I think that the conversation will continue, and you'll see a lot of work in policy around the world and governance around the world on how to make that possible.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at the moment, so this might be a wonderful time to wrap it up. If anyone has any closing remarks, feel free to chime in. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here and participating and bringing all of us your incredible expertise on everything. It was very wonderful to talk to all of you.
My closing remark, I think, everyone can add to, but I think what the message should be is that everyone who travels has value in these ecosystems. So it's really great, the possibility that you can be a genuine partner, a lifelong partner to the rainforests if you choose. And we think everyone ought to consider that. It's very fulfilling. It gives you friends and experiences that you will treasure for the rest of your life. So please consider traveling sustainably and making a difference.
Perfect words to send us off. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.